Leonardo da Vinci and chess. This is a chess set known as the Da Vinci chess set, and we're going to talk about exactly how that has come about. It's a reproduction made again after this set not existing for 500 years. Leonardo da Vinci was very good friends with a fellow named Luca Pacioli, and Luca Pacioli and Da Vinci together escaped or fled from Milan in 1499 and went to stay with this woman, the Countess Isabella d'Este. She was in Mantua, and that was a safe haven for them. She was about 26 years old at the time, but as a countess she had the authority to take these gentlemen in and give them refuge from whatever was going on over there. During that time, Da Vinci made this picture of her. This is what she looked like. And Pacioli, who was Da Vinci's friend, he wrote this book called De Ludo Scachorum. Now, Da Vinci and Pacioli had worked together before. They'd collaborated on a book about proportion, and Pacioli was a famous mathematician. Da Vinci, well, you know about Da Vinci. He was the essential Renaissance man. This is a reproduction of that book, and you see the book goes in a frame, which goes in a bigger frame, which has a ribbon tied around, which has a little booklet explaining it, and it goes in a sleeve. Somebody's made a very big production. You can Google this name. Somebody's made a big production about reproducing that book. It was from 2000. It was found in 2006. It was written about the year 1500 when Da Vinci and Pacioli were together. That book was dedicated to the Countess, who Da Vinci had also drawn. So these fellows were obviously together on this. It's reported that many of the illustrations in that book were done with the right hand and some were done with the left hand, and that would especially implicate Da Vinci since we know that he was left-handed. So the question we're after is, what about these chessmen? Let's look at them for a moment. The drawings are kind of rough. They're just drawn well enough so that you can definitely tell what's what, but they're not drawn like a fine Da Vinci drawing to show you exactly the details and the contours and everything like that. We're going to assume that these were actual chessmen and that they had their own details and contours. And to give us some idea of what that might have looked like, let's look at a almost contemporary chess set from Italy. This is a famous set by an artist named Embriachi, and it's actually about 50 years earlier, but much of the style would still be going on in that day. You see that the pieces have nice curves. Notice that the rook is a big fanned out sort of a butterfly shape. This knight or bishop is kind of mysterious. The pawns are very simple pieces of this form in this particular design. But what I want you to especially look at is the style. Notice how curves and elegant sort of scrolling is preferred here, but in a very stated, definite, handsome presentation. So we're going to be looking at handsomeness and elegance at the same time. For more information about what chess sets of that day look like, of course, we want to look at Murray's History of Chess. This is the classic history of chess book. It's almost 100 years ago that this was first published, but it's still essentially the Bible of chess history. Most of these sets were right around from that same period, around 1500, and you see there's a great variety. Caxton and some from, well, different parts of Europe, really. This is European sets. You can see the bishops were often split on the top, or they had a little ball. Or the rooks were often this thing kind of splayed out in one way or another. And fortunately, another book by Liddell, which has been recently republished by Frank Camarata, shows many of those shapes actually directly taken from Murray, but larger and easier to see. Look how the rook is splayed out here, or splayed out in this way in this particular one. Squared off in this one. Look at the pawns in particular. The pawns are these little sort of tapered cones with curved edges that come up to a ball on the top. there are many that are like that, basically. You see, if you look at Murray, in fact, you'll see more like that. This kind of shape was definitely a pawn. So let's look at where we're going from there. We're looking at the illustrations, but not only like one piece, because one doesn't give us enough information really. This one shows us the rook splits on the left side, but it doesn't show us the split on the right side. But this shows us that it's really a symmetrical kind of a shape, and so on. Piece by piece, we have put it together, and let me show you our drawings. This is basically what we've come up with. King, queen, bishop, knight, rook, different views, and a pawn. And then this was a kind of a preliminary drawing. A little bit of modification has been made, but let's look at those pieces one by one, and we'll see what we're talking about here. Pawn is very straightforward. I showed you those pawns in the drawing there. The head is a little bigger than those drawings, than the illustrations from Murray, because these really look like they're big-headed creatures, and so we want to honor that. And I don't think you could really go wrong but say that this is the pawn that's intended in these illustrations. The king. Now look at all these pieces. First of all, have a similar base. They've got a base and then a ring on the stem. Base, ring on the stem, base and ring on the stem. So we're just going to assume that those are all basically similar, but the top part, sort of the head of the piece, is different. Now the head of the king, very often in this time period, actually for centuries, it was a sort of a three-tiered fountain. Now we've got 1, 2 tiers, but oh, here's another illustration of the king, and look, it's got all three. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we have good reason to believe that the king looked very much like this in a sort of fountain form. And here's our reproduction. Very true to the style of that period. And notice that we give everything a little bit of curvature in honor of the pervading Renaissance aesthetic that we know was taking place then. So there's the king. It's pretty straightforward. The queen is kind of interesting. You don't see this in many other sets, but we have to look at the drawings carefully. We've got sort of a point on the top with a curve on the bottom. This one shows the point, but doesn't really show the curve so much. Some other drawings, this one doesn't show curves at all. It just shows a point on top. This one shows us kind of like a flare on top. Doesn't really show points, but shows sort of all curves. A little bit of a point there, but they're similar enough that you can see that they're the same. And if you look at the chess positions, you'll see that it makes sense to understand that. This one also shows the point, but doesn't show the curve. So we really have to assume that it's got, much like this, it's got the point and the curve, and we come up with a shape very much like this. Definitely would not be mistaken for any other piece illustrated here, and may be very similar to the original set that this was drawn after. Now the bishops are more unusual. You remember that I showed you bishops are often split things, and there's a variety. Here's one split 3 ways. Now this is different stuff. More bishops that are split. These bishops certainly don't show any indication of being split. They show a curve on top and a flat bottom of that top piece. This one's more of a blob, but as you look at more of them, you'll see that the pervading idea is a curve and a flat line there. Here is what we came up with in our drawing. The knight is exactly the same as the bishop, but with a little point coming up the top, and there's no indication of any other attribute of that top shape there. There's the bishop, there's the knight, a little points going off to the side, but all the other illustrations will show you certainly that it's a symmetrical piece. So here are those pieces in the flesh. You notice we always give our points some stylization as we think is appropriate for the time period. And let's look at the rook. Now the rook, should it be symmetrical just like those, all just lathe turned, or should it be splayed out like all these others? We have good reason to believe that it was kind of splayed out like these. And part of the reason is that if it were just turned, you wouldn't see some of the details that are shown in some of these, especially this. Notice how there's a definite line coming down on the top going away from the piece towards the ground. This one doesn't show it as much. This one shows it extremely clearly that there's lines intended to come down here. There's definitely a curve on the top like that. This one doesn't show the curve on the bottom, but some of them do show that the bottom, splays out towards the bottom, so that would indicate a curve on the bottom as well. This shows it a little bit. Using all these indications, each stroke is an indication of the actual form, then we have to tie that together in a form that makes sense. So what we've come with, let's see what we've come up with, is figures something like this. It's got that line coming down and out. It goes in on the edges, as we saw. It curves this way and it curves that way. It has all the attributes of the kind of various illustrations that we saw, and it makes a pleasant, sensible piece in line with the aesthetic that's shown in most of these, and in particular in the aesthetic of actual existent pieces that are shown here. So that was our drawing, and then the final piece has come in a little bit, so it's even more in line with the type of pieces that we see in our ancient illustrations here, things like this. So this is how we come upon our design, our chess design. Now let's look at the whole set. Let's see what we've got here. So once again, very much connection between this set and Leonardo da Vinci, the great artist. And just as a matter of curiosity, let me just show you one more thing in here. Notice that this shape is very much like our king, and this shape is very much like our queen. A curiosity, to be sure, among trees, but just a little note that that aesthetic sense was known and considered worth painting to Da Vinci himself. Here, let's look at the set now. Oh, there's a side note. I mentioned the pawns. Here's a game piece from a game called Trap, published in the 1970s. I think it was 72. Notice the similarity. If you took this guy's headdress off, it's almost the same shape. But we're not going modern. We're thinking that this type of shape was the existing shape in those days. Here's another example of a reproduced piece showing you that same three-tiered thing. This is actually reproduced from a painting by Lucas van Leyden, very much in the same time period. That painting was supposedly painted within 8 years of this painting, although this was down in Italy and that particular one was in the Netherlands. But once again, just an illustration of the pervading style of the king in those days, a three-tiered. I call it a fountain because that's what it makes me think of. The pieces are black and red, as you see, and very pleasant. They are weighted a little bit to give them more substance. They're given felt, which is what we do nowadays, just to make it pleasant for the modern player. It doesn't affect the look of the piece at all. And you can play this game. Let's see. I've got them set up as black and white. So in the modern day, we would have them set. Oh, wait a second. What am I talking about? Yeah, this is correct. In the modern day, we'd have it set like this. Then we, typical. This opening actually was used in those days. It's been documented. Roy Lopez. And that's the name of the fellow who documented it. Roy Lopez. Very pleasant set. And it's just been reproduced. We've got it at ancientchess.com. Now, we're going to do another video showing you, using this set, and showing you some of the positions in that book, talking about the actual meaning of the text. So, stay tuned and take another look at us. And as always, if you like our videos, do click like. That helps promote the video and helps promote the great majesty of chess in history.